anime might be better than ever, but there are still many examples of manga for whom a good adaptation is painfully out of reach. So what exactly is holding back so many stories that should be guaranteed hits? First, I should clarify this is actually a follow-up to a previous video, where I talk about how, in many cases, anime adaptations have become better than their manga. That video got a lot more attention than I was expecting, and received a number of comments with strong opinions, so I thought it's only fair to analyze the other side of the coin. The main series mentioned by commenters were of course One Punch Man, Berserk, and JoJo's. Funnily enough, Berserk and Steel Ball Run have held the top spots on manga rating sites for decades at this point, and Yusuke Murata, the artist behind One Punch Man's serialization, is often cited as one of the most skilled artists alive. Evidently, the bar is set very high for whoever dares to tackle an adaptation of these three. But before analyzing these cases, and others, I'll go over some of the advantages manga has over anime as a whole. So I went over this briefly in the last video, but the main advantage manga has is the number of drawings required to tell the story. Each panel or shot only needs to be drawn once, while anime requires up to 24 drawings per second, plus backgrounds and effects. This difference in workload leaves time for higher detail and more refined artwork. Additionally, a single author means a more streamlined production process, and a clearer artistic and narrative vision. It's also more consistent, as no artist's style is identical. Getting a whole animation team to draw the same character the same way every time is near impossible. And that's not a bad thing. Varied art styles can have their own charm, but it does stand out and can break people's immersion. Anime also has different content guidelines to manga, meaning some scenes might be toned down or censored depending on where it's aired. And I'm not just talking about gore or nudity, it can even be asinine details like Jotaro smoking a cigarette. The manga format also allows for unique tricks that can only be achieved with paneling. Take Chainsaw Man for example. It's not famous for being the best drawn manga ever, with the panels often resembling a movie's storyboard, but even then, Fujimoto will use clever paneling to have larger-than-life characters break through the boundaries, or make devils interact with the panels, giving their abilities a transcendent, supernatural feel. This is something that just doesn't transfer over to an animated medium. So how do adaptations deal with these issues? Well, to deal with the workload, animes usually pick a style that falls somewhere along this spectrum. At one end, you have high detailed and dynamic drawings, but very little motion beyond panning and mouth flaps. Shows like JoJo tend to fall here, in an attempt to stay faithful to the manga's legendary artwork. On the other end, you have low detail but high motion, with characters being fully animated in most shots. Here you'll find anime like Mob Psycho and early Trigger works. It's very rare for an adaptation to attempt both of these, so studios will often have to compromise in other ways if they want to have their cake and eat it, either by going off-model or resorting to CGI. MAPPA had to use CG during fight scenes for both Attack on Titan and Chainsaw Man, and while they implemented it better than most, it was still divisive to say the least. If anything, I imagine animators on Chainsaw Man were relieved to hear that fans actually wanted less detail in the anime. Talk about a lucky break. As for going off-model, it's more of a stylistic choice to give animators creative freedom, but also saves time by letting them stray further from the source material, instead of trying to painstakingly replicate the art in full detail. A famous example would be Naruto's Pain Fight, but we also see it in a lot of modern One Piece and JJK. Going off-model is also a contentious topic for a lot of fans, but personally, I believe the benefits are worth it. After all, high detail drawings are much harder to follow during action scenes, so it's a good creative solution to multiple issues. On this topic, Demon Slayer is an example that is incredibly strict about staying on model, so much so that a lot of the action scenes don't actually have that many drawn frames, and instead rely on effects animation to keep things fluid. A lot of what people call good animation is actually compositing and VFX work. Speaking of shows that rely on aspects other than animation, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is famous for this. People often joked that JoJo's art style was too difficult to animate, and nobody attempted a full adaptation until 25 years after it started publishing. Even then, the animation was still very limited, but JoJo compensates for this by excelling in every other facet. The music, the crazy sound design, the wild colors, and the iconic line deliveries make up for the animation's shortcomings. The Pillar Men's introduction is just a still image, but it's one of the show's most iconic moments thanks to what I just mentioned. But it might not be enough anymore, since despite looking just as good as recent JoJo seasons, Part 7's teaser trailer wasn't received with as much praise. This could be because standards have raised so high in the last decade that David Productions' old strategy won't cut it anymore. Or maybe it's because JoJo's artwork just keeps getting better, with Part 7 being considered Araki's magnum opus, while the anime's art has stayed basically the same since Part 5. Just kidding, it's the CGI horses, isn't it? For these reasons, fans are becoming skeptical for the future of JoJo's adaptation, but a certain series has it far worse right now. The decline of One Punch Man's anime is a tragedy that hits particularly hard for me, as Season 1 was actually the first anime I watched in full that got me hooked on the medium. I wouldn't be here without it. And what a show to start with. Industry legends came together to deliver the cleanest, most beautifully animated 12-episode run I've ever seen. Sure, the artwork wasn't quite as intricate as the manga, but it was perfectly balanced between detail and motion. Season 1 didn't even have that high of a budget. It was a pure, generation-defining passion project, and it showed that a good adaptation of a highly detailed manga was possible, given the right compromises. But it wouldn't last, as Season 2 was sold off to a different studio, and the production team was replaced. The animation was an obvious step down, but kept a decent amount of motion. The main flaws were an inability to stay on model and poor texture work. In retrospect, it was okay, since the arcs it covers weren't as exciting as what came before. But Season 3 would cover the Monster Association arc, which is what the whole story was building up to. When I mentioned last time that executives would stop putting as much effort or budget into a series once it's a guaranteed hit, this is what I was referring to. Season 3 attempts to go the JoJo route of using detailed frames with limited animation, without understanding why it works for JoJo's. It offers nothing beyond a couple color filters, and even then most of the stills can't match the detail of previous seasons. I'm not even blaming the poor animators working on it, because they were evidently given no time at all to pump this out. But Bandai may have gone too far this time, as Season 3 is such a catastrophic failure that it's become an industry laughingstock. Maybe they'll finally learn from this experience, or cancel the show as a whole. And with that, on to the next. Full disclosure, I've never read Berserk, so I won't claim to be an expert on this, but I did my research and talked to a number of friends about their experience, and this seems to be the consensus. Berserk has a similar issue to JoJo, where the artwork is so intricate and the story so legendary that doing it justice is near impossible. That being said, people seem to like the 90s adaptation for its fantastic tone. I mean, who hasn't heard the hauntingly beautiful soundtrack? However, it cut out some of the story, both to save on time and to avoid particularly graphic content. And it took 15 years for someone to attempt another adaptation, with the Golden Age movie trilogy. It remained quite faithful to the manga, using a mix of 2D and 3D animation, but wasn't as well received as the original for this reason. But things were only going to get worse from here, as the infamous 2016 adaptation failed in almost every aspect. I think people would be more willing to overlook the 3D animation if it was actually, you know, animated. And don't get me started on the sound design. In any case, all three of these examples failed to live up to the monumental expectations set by the manga. In conclusion, even though anime adaptations have come a long way in the last few years, there will always be some manga that can't be beaten for one reason or another. And when you consider that some of these stories hold legendary status, there will always be a portion of fans that are left unsatisfied, no matter how faithful it is. Combine this weight of expectation with the unique strengths that the manga format holds, and it's not surprising that some anime will never beat their manga. Hey, congrats on making it this far into the video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to leave a like, and subscribe if you want to see more. Do you want to know something? I secretly launched a Patreon this week, so if you want early access to the next video or your name in the credits, or maybe even commission some voice work, then feel free to check out the links in the description. That's all I have to say for now, so until next time, goodbye.